Hello, hello. So I'm so pleased to be going live today to talk to you about managing emotions. This is such a big topic. And so many of the questions that I get are in one way or another about managing emotions. And they're not always phrased that way, but that's often what is meant. So, hello, Lacey. Nice to see you. Jessica, let me know. Send me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I'm using a mic today and going live direct on YouTube. And for those of you watching the replay, feel free to post a comment. I try to respond to many, and other people can respond as well. So I think we're going to get started very soon. So this is going to be an experiential workshop, right? And I'd love to get feedback. I'm going to lead you through an exercise. I'll explain it a little bit first, and we'll see what comes up for you. And I think it will be a tool that you will find very useful and you can use over and over again in your life I should say, as you develop a deeper and deeper understanding of yourself and your emotions and what they're telling you. So LTD 500 from Boston, Pascal from Belgium, wonderful. Robert from the Czech Republic, and Gloria. Yeah, nice to see everybody. All right, I'm assuming everybody can hear. Send those thumbs up. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay. So let me just double check here. So some of you may have seen the little shorts that I'm doing on emotions and emotional intelligence, and really understanding our emotions and learning to read them is critical. Like, it's really very important. Thank you, Teresa. You can hear me. Great, great. Pascal, thumbs up. Awesome. And Mia from Pretoria, South Africa. Deborah from Portland. That's wonderful. We have such an international group. That's just terrific. So what we tend to do in life, and I think this applies to all humans, is we try to avoid difficult emotions and we try to grasp onto positive emotions. And okay, that's natural, makes total sense. We try to give ourselves experiences that will bring us positive emotions and avoid those that will give us negative. The problem is that we are going to have all of those emotions. So the activities that we engage in, either to grasp onto the good stuff, to like really try to hold it, will eventually bring us pain. And the efforts we make to push away those difficult emotions, that will also bring us pain eventually. So really learning to have a little more equanimity around your emotions can help so much. It really can. And a few examples that just pop into my mind. You fall in love and this person makes you feel great, like really just makes you feel awesome. And then they disappear or they didn't feel the same way or whatever. And you just are grasping and desperate for the feeling that person gave you. We get confused. We think we're desperate for the person, but we're actually desperate for the feeling that was given to us. And then obviously pushing away difficult emotions, we do all sorts of things to avoid them, from sort of the extremes of using drugs or alcohol to numb ourselves, right? Or food to numb ourselves, to, whatever kind of compulsive behavior we can get into, or denial or compartmentalization. We do all sorts of things to like push away that tough stuff. So hopefully this is all making sense. And John is saying hello from the bottom of the rabbit hole of the internet. Welcome, John. Nice to see you. And B from Pennsylvania, Steve from Canada. Awesome. Bajay from South Carolina. Hope I'm saying your name right. And speed watching the first few minutes. Okay, you can catch up here, no problem. All right, I think, the last thing I want to say as we go into this, a couple things. I'm going to have you bring to mind a situation, but not an extreme one, right? So for these kind of experiential things, particularly the first time you're doing it, online with me, but basically by yourself, pick something that's upsetting. Like if we have a 0 to 10 scale, pick something that's like a 5 to 6. Don't pick the 8 to 10. Okay. That's just like a little bit of a warning because this will be a practice and an experience. But I want to have you bring to mind some situation in your life currently, if you can, that brings up an emotion that's difficult for you. Okay. Now, you don't have to spend too much time now bringing that to mind, but I'm just putting that out there so you're prepared for that. So I'm going to have you do that. But before that, I also want to talk about habitual emotions. And some of you may have heard me talk about these, but if we have a habitual emotion, like a big one for my audience is anxiety. It's habitual. It's like it's the first emotion you go to, right? Then that anxiety or that habitual emotion is covering up everything else. So you may know somebody whose habitual emotion is anger, right? Who just goes to anger no matter what. Anger, anger, anger. Or depression or anxiety. I'd say those are probably the biggies, but there's probably a few more. But somebody who always goes to one emotion, that emotion is actually covering up all sorts of other emotions. So if your habitual pattern comes up with the situation that you're going to think of, which I'm guessing it will, we can just think of that in terms of a habitual emotion if it is. And if it's a different one, don't worry about it. No problem with that as well. And Graham, I'm glad to see you joining from Alberta, Canada. And Nancy says, love the shorts you're doing. Thanks, Nancy. I appreciate that from Texas. All righty. So what I want to start with is I want to start with a bit of grounding for you right now. And as I lead you through this exercise today, I'd like you to pay a lot of attention to kind of physically what you feel. If an emotion comes up for you, where do you feel it physically? We're going to start with a little bit of diaphragmatic breathing. And I just want you to notice what your body does, like what shifts internally as we do this. All right. So I'm going to lean back a little bit in my chair because that's a little easier for diaphragmatic breathing. If any of you like have a meditation cushion you want to sit on or whatever, but just chair is fine. I'm in a chair. So kind of sit with your spine a little bit straight, your feet on the floor if you can. Pull up by the crown of your head. And I want you to take a nice deep breath and a nice slow exhale. And you can close your eyes for this if you're comfortable doing that, or keep them open. But again, let's just take another nice deep breath and a nice slow exhale. And I'm going to breathe a little bit audibly so you can hear me because sometimes that's helpful. But let's breathe into a slow count of 4 and exhale somewhere in the 6 to 8 range. And if your breathing doesn't match mine, no problem. So take a nice deep inhale into the bottom of your lungs. And then a nice slow exhale. I'm going to count to 6. And again. And then keep diaphragmatically breathing as I'm speaking with you. And on your next exhale, I'd like to see if you can let go of some of the tension around your eyes and your jaw. So as you breathe out, see if you can relax all your facial muscles. And then another deep breath in. And then this time on the exhale, I'd like to ask you to release, drain away any tension in your neck and shoulders. Take another deep breath, and this time on the exhale, Choose whatever you'd like, any part of you that feels some tension, and see if you can release it a little bit using that exhale. Sorry for the noise. So, okay, I'd like to know from a handful of people, as you did that diaphragmatic breathing, did anything physical shift for you? You can just send me a comment, and there's a bit of a delay, so I'll move on to the next thing. But if you type in a comment, that would be great. And if you are noticing any shifts in your body, just observe it, just non judgmentally. We're not criticizing, we're not looking for any particular result. So just notice. Okay. Anchor, I feel calmer and free from tensions. Lovely. Gloria, calmer. Lacey, the feeling in my chest, not as strong. Excellent. LTD 500, a little bit. Yes. Terrific. So, diaphragmatic breathing is a terrific way to physiologically bring yourself down. Okay. So, just notice that feeling of a little bit more calm, a little bit lighter in your chest. If it had the opposite impact for you, that's okay too. Just notice, just notice. And then let's just take a moment and feel our feet on the floor. Like, really put your attention into your feet. If they're in socks, feel the socks, and then feel the shoe, feel the floor or the ground underneath you. Really bring your attention to your feet. Take a deep breath. And really bring your attention to your hearing. Whatever sounds you hear, non-judgmental awareness. And then let's just come back to the screen. Okay. So now we've physiologically brought ourselves down just a little bit. And as we move to this next step, I want you to notice what shifts in your body. Okay. So right now, I'd like you to bring up the difficult situation we talked about, the one that's, somewhere between a 5 and a 6 on a scale of 10, not like the worst thing in the world, but just something that's nagging at you, bugging you, bothering you. Bring it to mind. Now, for some of you, the second you brought that to mind, your body changed. So if that happened for you, let us know. Like if you're willing to share that, you may have noticed your heart rate went up. You may have noticed all the tension flooded back in. You might have noticed your breathing changed, or you got a headache, or all sorts of things, right? But just notice as you brought that difficult situation to mind, what changed for you, if anything. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to really bring it to mind. So we're just going to sit here in our chair and I want you to bring the story to mind, right? Like often our stories are like, he did such and such, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then, oh, I'm so, blah, 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 I can't believe they did this, and then I can't believe I did this. No, how stupid of me, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Like I know what these stories sound like because I have plenty of them. Let's let it fly. I'm going to give you a second. I want you to bring that story to mind as intensely as you can right now. We're going to intensify that story. And again, as you do that, notice what's happening to you physically. And we're just going to let your mind rip here for another 30 seconds. Okay, so now notice what's shifted for you physically. Now that you've given yourself time to like get into that storyline, What's happening in your body? If you want to take a second to type in, that's great. Helps me know people are on track. Earlier, Dana wrote that she clenched her teeth when we did this exercise. LTDs, anxiety came back. So you can send me a quick note or just notice for yourself. That's fine. Okay. So now I want to ask you to bring that same kind of attention that we put on the breathing, but we're not going to put it on breathing this time. We're going to put it on what you're feeling physically. So if you can label the emotion that came up for you, but we're going to try to just drop the storyline and feel the energy of that emotion. This part might be easiest if you close your eyes, but whatever shifted in your body, bring your attention there non judgmentally if you can. We're not trying to do anything at this point with that feeling in your body, just observing. Just notice. And if the feeling has a name, okay, let's say it's anxiety or anger or sadness or frustration, right? You can name the emotion and observe where it's sitting in your body. And then let's just take a moment, close our eyes if that's comfortable for you. Really bring your attention to that energy in your body, dropping the storyline. So if your mind goes back to the storyline, just redirect your mind to the physical sensation. Again, if your mind goes back to the story, just redirect it back to the physical sensation. Okay, so now I'd like to hear from you what's happening as you're just putting your attention on the physical elements of that emotion. Can you tell me what's happening? I'm imagining people will have very different responses with this question, but there might be one or two that are more common than others. So, okay, so Deborah, as you're focusing on the feeling and the emotion, you can hear your breathing. What's happening to that physical feeling? As you're hearing your breathing, is that physical feeling increasing or is it kind of fading away? Mia shared earlier that she was feeling paralyzed when she brought up the negative event. So if you're feeling paralyzed or numb as we do this, my recommendation actually is that you get up and do a jumping jack or stomp your feet on the floor or do something to kind of bring yourself back because sometimes when we do these exercises, if if our habitual pattern is to freeze, right? That's a little bit of a numbing thing. When we go inside and we begin to think about what we're feeling, we can sometimes freeze. If that's happening to you, a little rapid tapping on your shoulders, a jumping jack, do something to get back into your body. All right. Deborah said it's fading. Okay. And Sue says feeling in stomach has subsided. Carrie said behind the forehead feels tired and achy. My lips feel tense, chest aches. And you're feeling concave. Yeah, your posture's concave. Okay. So, Carrie, as you just kind of observe that, right? If we drop the story, Just observing those physical changes. See what happens. See if, as you simply observe them, whether they intensify or kind of fade away. Pascal sharing, Pascal couldn't label the emotion. No problem. No problem. Were you able to identify like the feeling that was coming up, like the physical feeling? Because if you can't label it, it's all right. We can still just keep going. Um, just notice what the physical changes are. And then the next step is, as you focus on those physical feelings, notice, do they intensify or do they disappear? And then notice, do you need that storyline to maintain those feelings? Like sometimes we get this storyline around something, particularly if it has to do with like either our stupidity, because we can go around and around about that, or our, supposed stupidity, or something that's not fair, like unjust or being treated unjustly or whatever. Those are kind of those stories, and they just become total thought worms and they go around and around. But to maintain those physical feelings in your body, do you kind of need that storyline? Okay, Dana, your mind's trying to rewrite the accident, things you should have done to avoid it. If you can, for the purpose of this exercise, Dana, just observe. We're not trying to do anything. Just observe. So when you think of that accident, you felt all the body shifting. You said your teeth clenched. So right now, just take a moment. I'm going to be quiet for another minute just so people can really do this again. Drop the storyline. Don't try to rewrite it right now for this exercise. We're trying to drop it. So the same way, like if you're a meditator, right, and you're meditating and you're thinking, the second you realize you're thinking, you bring your attention back to your breath. With this exercise, if you're thinking, bring your attention back to the feeling in your body. So for Dana, if her teeth clenched, just bring your awareness to what that feels like and just keep your awareness there. So try as hard as you can to think about nothing but that feeling. And we're dropping the storyline. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to give you another moment, just noticing physically. If you can stay in your body and not in the head, what happens to those feelings? So I'm going to pause here and talk a little bit again. So generally, we do need the storyline to maintain the emotion. And the emotion has both, emotional components and physical. And they are inextricably linked. They just are there, right? And we all have our habitual patterns around it. So generally, something happens to us. Our mind thinks about it, right? We clench, we tighten. The stress is reflected for us physically. And if we can just drop the storyline for a moment and observe the emotion, emotions generally will peak and then subside. There'll be an intensity and then they'll subside. So without the storyline, it's not sustained. So far we've done maybe 2/3 of this exercise, but I also do want to get feedback from how this is going for you, because there is one more step we're going to explore. Dana, my jaw relaxed by itself just by observing it. Exactly, exactly. Graham, I need the storyline to maintain the crappy feeling. If I just focus on the feeling without the storyline, the negative feeling gradually subsides. Yes. Nancy, a realization that tightness and fear is optional. Awesome. With the breathing, I can shift to love for the person and situation. Okay, so that's sort of another advanced stage would be shifting to that. But that's wonderful. Anchor earlier shared my inability to let go is my self destructive behavior. So, again, that's going back into your head. So, for this exercise, just notice. You could even use that sentence as the thought or storyline. You could use that sentence as your storyline. What does that sentence make you feel? And then we're going to drop the sentence. We're going to drop it and just notice the feeling. Okay. So, I'm going to reiterate what we've done in case you'd like to practice this on your own. But the step number one, and this actually is also a very good technique to combine with meditation if you have a practice. But step number one would be to diaphragmatically breathe, bring yourself, or do grounding exercises, bring yourself to a place where you're feeling sort of present and grounded. Then bring up the difficult situation and notice, right? So you're going to notice muscles tense, heart races, pit in the stomach, whatever your physical feelings are. And you're going to let that grow. You're going to let yourself have 2 minutes of like going into the storyline and maybe even have a bell that goes off. Ding, drop the storyline. Focus on the emotion and see what happens. Okay. So the next part of this, I'm going to kind of lead you guys back through it to do this next part. So I'm going to give you a minute, bring back the storyline. Now, the feelings that come up for you this time might have shifted, and I'd be interested if they did, but for others, they may not. But let's bring back that storyline. Let's let you get into it. Like, let's still really rip, right? That's what my voice sounds like when I go into those storylines. Let it rip. Feel your body, get all of those habitual feelings and emotions and tensions and patterns. So we're going back into it. Okay, so you're back in the story. You're feeling stuff in your body. Now, again, this time, let's see if you can label the emotion. And again, if you can't, no problem. If you can, great. And I'm going to come back. If you still can't identify the feeling, I'll come back to that. But for the moment, identify it if you can. Notice where it is in your body. I'm going to have you close your eyes. And I'd like you to really picture this emotion in your body. So really picture, you can give it a shape. You can give it a color. Notice if it's hot or cold. Notice if it moves or if it's really like dug in there. But notice all the physical sensations that go with the emotions that came up for you. And if you can just really picture and feel that emotion. And now I'm going to ask you to go under it. Let's see if there is a deeper emotion hiding underneath the one you're feeling. So again, if your eyes are closed, you've been focusing on the main emotion that came up for you. If you let that emotion drain away a little or just simmer, But let's see what's under it. Is there a deeper emotion underneath it? And again, if there is, just notice, just notice. And does that emotion live somewhere else in your body? Is that emotion a more subtle, maybe one you dislike even more? And can you just let yourself feel it? Can you just let yourself feel the emotion that's underneath? And we've dropped the storyline. We're just focusing on what's happening internally for us. And if you've accessed a deeper emotion, what does that emotion tell you? What is that emotion communicating to you? Okay. All right. So I'd love to hear some feedback, and then I can help people sort of move through this process. I'll respond to your questions or your situation. But let me know if you were able to identify a deeper emotion. And if you weren't, that's fine. Just notice what happened to the original emotion, right? Let's see. All right. Dana, deep sadness that I might never be healthy again. Okay. Sue, it had nothing to do with me. Awesome. Pascal, I noticed anger but didn't express it. I remained calm. Okay. And Tessa, definitely. Okay. So for Dana, who shared the deep sadness piece, I'm wondering if anxiety was the initial emotion. I'm kind of just guessing. I don't know for sure. But as I said, our habitual emotions cover other ones up. And I find that anger covers up hurt. Okay. If we habitually get angry, or even if we have like a oomph anger, anger happens when something hurt our feelings, but we don't like to feel hurt. We don't like to feel vulnerable. Don't like to express that we feel hurt to people, right? So we just go right to anger. We may not even notice the hurt until we really sit with it. So hurt is one of those emotions we really try to avoid, but if we sit with it, the same thing happens as with any other emotion. It kind of peaks and then ebbs, right? And it's okay. We're human. We get hurt sometimes, right? We're all pretty clumsy in our relationships, I would say. And we say things that hurt other people's feelings without meaning it. And other people hurt our feelings without meaning it. And if somebody is trying to hurt our feelings and meaning it, then there's somebody to avoid. But that's a little bit of a different story. But yeah, okay, so hurt is often under anger. I find underneath anxiety is sadness often. Either powerlessness we don't want to admit, right? If there's a situation happening and we stay in anxiety, anxiety is like pretending I can do something about this. I can fix this health issue I have, or I can fix this addiction problem in my loved one, or I can fix whatever it is. And anxiety is going to keep me there, but it's not true because we actually are powerless. But going under the anxiety and then feeling that powerlessness, which is another thing most people don't like to feel, then brings us to sadness. And that's a feeling we avoid. Anxiety because my spouse doesn't understand my head injury. But what's under the anxiety, right? There's something under the anxiety. Anxiety is like I can fix this. I can get the person. Maybe under that is a little bit of sadness, right? Or loneliness. And I also just want to say I feel for you with a head injury. Those are so hard. My son had one for 6 months. And yeah, it's an invisible wound. People don't understand. That's really hard. Um, okay, so Christine, underneath feelings of shame and then feelings of not being good enough. So for the shame, interesting to see where that sits in your body. And then actually, I'm going to share an exercise for those emotions towards the end. Let me just jot myself a note here. Because, yeah, so sometimes we can get to these emotions that really are hard, right? Like shame is a really hard feeling, loneliness, right? Um, and Mia, even when I felt the initial paralysis, I felt the rejection based on family rejection. So, what does rejection feel like? Where do you feel that? And then what's under that? I think under rejection is probably sadness or maybe shame, right? Yeah. Graham, I often feel bewildered by other people's behavior. Yeah, if only everybody behaved the way I wanted them to, the world would be a better place. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, people's behavior can be bewildering for sure. Um, ah, Kirk's blame that it's my fault was underneath all of that. Interesting. Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I guess if we feel blamed or we feel like it really is our fault, that might be something we push away. We might push it away with anger. I mean, I see this in a lot. I see this in people, right? If they get like really angry and attack, sometimes it's because they really do feel at fault. But and a number of you are actually coming up with the deeper level being tied to these negative core beliefs, right? So hopefully most of you have downloaded the PDF that I have on, you know, um, turning over what I call it, but overcoming your negative core beliefs. But yeah, if you have one or two negative core beliefs like unworthiness or something like that, those need to be healed. So there's a message there. So maybe the message, if something's coming up for you like shame, not being good enough, being guilty, being blamed, or feeling it's your fault, and if those are the feelings coming up, it might I'm trying to think how to help you guys work with this, and then I saw a note and my mind switched, but I'm gonna come back to that. Oh, I know what it is. Okay. If what's coming up for you is a negative core belief, no, it's not true. Okay. I just want to put out there, no, it's not true. And the message could be this is what needs to be healed. So if I'm feeling angry or anxious or whatever, but way underneath that is a feeling that I'm not good enough, then what needs to be healed is my feeling good enough. That's the work. So don't see the message as you go under these emotions. If you get to a message like that, don't see that as like a true message the emotion's giving you. See it as that's your habitual negative core belief and that needs healing. So the surface situation that was coming up for you is actually not really the point, right? Resolving that situation is not going to heal that deeper feeling. Resolving that situation just means that situation is going to reoccur in a different form 3 weeks from now. So, not to let your head get stuck in that situation, right? Not to get stuck in the storyline, because the storyline, in a way, is beside the point. All right. Let's see if that makes any sense. Okay. Anger that my ex used the police in the divorce 4 times. Okay. So under that anger, right? So the storyline, right? That storyline, the storylines around our exes and the storylines around, particularly things that involve the court or judgment or all of that kind of stuff, being judged by people. Those storylines can be so intense, we have a very hard time dropping them. But if we drop that storyline, just feel the emotion and then go under that, there's probably a whole host of feelings under that anger, I would guess, from a somewhat similar situation. Um, I would say sadness, powerlessness, yeah, mainly sadness and powerlessness, right? Frustration is a form of anger. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Ajit said, my feeling is disturbed, but as I started feeling it, it became less intense. Great. Awesome. And my storyline is panic. Okay, Phyllis. Yeah, that is rough, but panic can be healed. Definitely panic can be healed, and there is something underneath panic, right? And diaphragmatic breathing, very important for people who feel panic is to learn diaphragmatic breathing as a tool that you use regularly, not when you're in the middle of a panic attack. Use it all day long. Set your alarm 4 times and practice it 4 rounds. And carry fear. Fear like electricity throughout the body. Okay. If you make a mistake, it could have disastrous consequences. Yeah. Okay. So, again, not to validate the storyline pieces, but feel the emotion. And as I think it was Nancy said earlier, that as she was feeling the emotion, she realized, like, wow, some of this physical feeling is optional. Like, I can have fear. And then when I explore it, I realize, right at this moment, I'm safe enough, right? So it's really bringing things in because if we have these fears, like, yes, something could go wrong. Absolutely, something could go wrong, but also something could go right. Why torture your body? You're torturing your body. When you focus on something can go wrong and you have all the adrenaline cortisol, which everybody who spoke up today felt when they thought of these situations, right? All of those feelings, teeth clenching, tension in your shoulders, stomach upset. That's all from the adrenaline cortisol stress response physically in your body that's actually not needed when we think about something. But it's very hard to learn to separate them. So, this exercise is part of that. So, Graham, frustration and impatience, two of my strongest underlying emotions. Yes. So, wonderful practices for frustration and impatience are becoming okay with exactly what is right at this moment. So, mindfulness practices are really, really good for those emotions. I can have those emotions too fairly often. Okay. I want to come to YouTube Sir Steve. How can feelings of unworthiness be healed? So a lot of my online work talks about this, but it can't all be done on a self-help basis. It really can't. So in that PDF that I have where you identify your negative core belief, I give you 3 techniques that you can use to strengthen the positive, right? So we go to the I'm unworthy, and then the positive would be I'm worthy enough, right? So there's ways of practicing with that. But honestly, if we have a negative core belief that we developed in childhood and we've lived for decades, probably reinforcing this negative core belief in one way or another, it could be very hard to rewind on your own. So, a therapist who's skilled, particularly EMDR, some of the concepts not the drop the storyline, but the negative core belief concept comes from EMDR. So, therapists who work with that, there's other healing modalities. There may just be a need to gain perspective, particularly for healing things like shame, because shame is really shame or unworthiness is really a feeling of like, I'm lousy. It's not like I did something bad or, hey, I have this weakness, but I have those strengths. It's like, no, all of me, yuck. And it can be very hard to shift that perspective by yourself. So I do encourage people that if you've been working with those sort of techniques, healing it might require, working with a therapist. And some of you know some of you have even been in my 6-month program. I do have a 6-month program also that does lead people through this, and we've had major success. So that would be another option. There's a number of different ways, but getting outside perspective so that you can really begin to reverse some of those feelings. Okay. So MD is sharing severe shame, fear of failure, which immobilizes me. So again, if we're dropping the storyline, there can't be fear of failure if we're dropping the storyline. So fear of failure, you bring that up, you notice what happens in your body, and maybe if it immobilizes you, a feeling of numbness might come up. Just observe that numbness, just observe it, breathe into it. And see what happens to the feeling, right? The belief, I'm afraid of failure, so it immobilizes me. So I can't do anything because I'm afraid of failure, right? Those are the storylines. And I'm not saying there's anything invalid in the storyline at all. This is just a tool to go under that, right? To go under that fear and observe what's happening for you physically. All right, let me know if this is all making sense. And I'm going to close today. Well, I'm going to give you one more exercise, and then we'll do a closing. Oh, you're welcome, YouTubester Steve. I love your name. Okay, so let's all take a moment. If you want to start again with the storyline, the thing that bothers you, bring it to mind. Notice physically what comes up for you. I'm going to count down, and I'm just going to say 3, 2, 1, drop the storyline. I'm just going to count down, and then we'll drop the storyline and just pay attention to what we're feeling physically. So bringing, still you're on the storyline. You're bringing those emotions up. 3, 2, 1, drop the storyline. Just bring your attention to the feeling, to the physical feeling in your body. Just really notice what that feeling feels like. Is it hot, cold, sharp, dull? Does it move? Just really notice the feeling. And then let's go under it. Let's go under that feeling to whatever the deeper emotions are. And just feel those emotions. If they begin to turn into a phrase or a belief, let's try to just let that go and just focus on the feeling. And now I want to share a technique that you can use with these deeper feelings. Actually, you can use it with all of them. But I'm going to bring up shame because a number of people mentioned that. So just bringing up that deep feeling, right? Let's say it's a deep feeling of shame or fear. Just notice it. And I want you to take a nice big diaphragmatic breath and direct the breath to the part of your body that has that feeling. And as you exhale, see if you can feel the breath almost as if it's rain washing away mud a little bit. This is probably easiest again with your eyes closed, but just take a nice deep breath. Direct the breath to that physical spot where that feeling is. And on the exhale, see if some of that feeling can drain away. Another deep breath. And on the exhale, see if the breath can be like water washing away mud or paint, and just see a little bit of that emotion draining into the floor. If you had given your emotion a color, you can actually picture that color draining away to the floor, to the ground beneath you. Another deep breath. And just let that feeling drain away. Okay. So let me know. So in the next, whatever we have left here, like 8 minutes or so, I'll answer questions. Let me know what questions you might have. Let me know whether that worked, trying to have the breath help you drain away just the pure emotion. We're just draining away the energy of the emotion. We're not trying to change the story or get into the story. We're just seeing if we can drain a little bit of that emotion away. Tessa says it's working for me. Thank you. Awesome. I'm so glad, Tessa. And I'm going to go back to a couple of the comments here, which I think are awesome. Lori was sharing she had red hot anger and it moved to blue, softer sadness. Wow. Yeah. So I'm interested, Lori, whether breathing into that sadness, like let it drain away. Will says it drained away a portion. Sue said the draining part's key for me. Awesome. Alan, I'm terribly late. No worries, Alan. This will be This will be on YouTube for watching for the replay. Teresa said I feel a positive shift in my emotions. Wonderful. Okay, so this technique of dropping the storyline, I learned it through some Buddhist organizations that I was involved in. So it's used a lot with meditators, right? Because when you meditate, very intense emotions can come up when you meditate. And this is a tool to just sit and observe them, see what happens. And then I also just think it's incredibly important to understand that our emotions ebb and flow. They change all the time. And we are going to have all of them. We are going to feel all the emotions up and down the spectrum, right? Unless we're pushing everything into one or two habitual emotions, which is not uncommon. But under those habitual emotions, there's going to be a wide range. Another one we didn't talk about, but I think I want to do a short on it, is disappointment. I find people will avoid the emotion of disappointment like so strongly, like they don't want to feel that, right? So, Tisha, dropping the story, redirecting my thoughts to my body made me feel more calm and grounded. Kirk, okay, it worked. So, the fact that it worked for you, identifying the emotion and it physically changed, right? Practice with it for a while, Kirk. I know you want a solution, right? People want a solution. Okay, well, how do I fix this, right? But all of this stuff is a process. And given, Kirk, that the exercise of identifying the emotion and then watching it ebb and flow worked, practice with it. See what happens. Practice with it for like a week and see if other stuff begins to shift, because I feel it will. Because, when we feel shame and we reject parts of ourselves, or let's say we really criticize ourselves for getting angry or resentful, right? Like we are very critical of our own emotional responses, then we're reenacting the I don't know, trauma or reenacting the hurt ourselves, versus this technique of like sitting with sadness and being like, okay, this is a human emotion. There's a lot of people around the world feeling this, right? And same thing with shame. Like, unfortunately, this is not an unusual emotion. And can I just sit with it and observe it? Gloria, the black color faded, white appeared. Graham felt a release. Pascal, great. I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you very much. I do want to come back to someone because I know she mentioned a friend in the Ukraine. So, Lori, I saw blue wash down the drain with my breath. I love it. I love it. Awesome. 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 So, someone wrote about fear, Tessa, fear, safety for your friend in the Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, human life is tricky. There's a lot of really, really difficult things. And sugarcoating that is, in my view, not helpful, right? Yeah, what's happening in the Ukraine is scary and upsetting. And if you know someone personally there, you're worried for them. That's because you have a heart, and it's hard, right? Like, sometimes we create pain by ourselves. Like, we all do it, right? We just sort of like we interpret something wrong, or we just get stuck in a habitual pattern in our head, and we're definitely creating our own pain. And then sometimes there's true pain in the world, right? Some people do horrible things. Luckily, not most, truly not most. And I do think sometimes it's helpful to refocus on those that help, on the stories that are more uplifting, right? But yeah, life can be hard. Okay. Uh, BJ asked, do you do live every week? And I probably didn't say your name right. I don't go live every week, but I am going to try to go live more often. And I'm so glad. I think we had a lot of people today on the live. Terrific. So I want to thank everybody for participating so actively and for communicating and sharing the experience. And I think for those who shared, the exercise of just observing the emotion, dropping the storyline helped. It sounded to me like it really can help. And it's a great tool to practice with. And then for, I'm trying to remember who was having such a hard time identifying the emotions. That's okay too. But as you do this, you might begin to identify them. And also, I think that for me, when I have trouble identifying an emotion, it's mainly because I have a bunch happening at once, right? Like I might feel angry and sad and frustrated and irritated and shame and boom, when they're all together. So this exercise also kind of helps me piece through them, right? Peel through them, get to the core, and then the accepting of the emotion, which I was going to say earlier, like the acceptance of it is accepting ourselves. That is part of our healing. So part of our healing is treating ourselves and treating our difficult emotions kindly. That in and of itself is a healing thing. So thank you, everybody. If you have ideas for other lives, I did post a little poll in the community section of my channel. Check that out. And you're welcome, Graham. Thank you. Thank you, LTD and David and Will. I hope you guys all have an awesome Tuesday. Bye.